better roll them dice. You never know if it could change your life. Take a chance, you neither wrong or right. You never know if you don't go.
Hello and welcome to the end of the year episode of Dungeon Master of None.
Happy holidays and approaching New Year, Matt. This is Dungeon Master Rob.
Dungeon Master Matt, and this is our last episode of the year, and it's definitely it's probably the best one. So
yep.
You could skip all the other episodes.
The best.
Go straight.
We definitely put a lot of effort, a lot of time into this one. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a mailbag, folks. We haven't done one of these in a while. Sorry, we have had interviews and tasked ourselves with some truly absurd projects, but we're finally getting to your mail, and we're gonna try to answer as many as we can. Go into the new year fresh, or as fresh as possible. So as always, thank you for your letters and for writing in, and we're gonna try to answer them as thoughtfully and helpfully as we can. As always, your mileage may vary.
Yes. We've got some Dungeon Master advice, a lot of responses and reactions and critiques to our 3-part reaction episode. But let's get to some Dungeon Master advice to start things off nice and easy. What do you say, Rob?
Sounds good. Let's ease into it.
Here's our first message. I was listening to your discussion of world building and John Wick and Harry Potter and the discussion of immersion versus detailed. I wanted to introduce you to the writing term, quote, putting a hat on a hat, unquote. It means adding an unnecessary addition to something that is working pretty well. A simple premise is saying there's an underground economy of Hitman and having an audience accept one implausible premise and see where it goes. When you try to add to that bizarre premise, it is putting a hat on a hat and makes the original weirdness obvious to your audience and ruins their ability to suspend disbelief. I'm probably butchering the lesson, but it's generally a rule that most movies follow. Don't draw attention to the weird thing and your audience will accept it. Put a hat on it and your audience will start to feel uncomfortable with it. Devin,
thank you. You didn't butcher it. This is incredibly clear and a great point. I think I have encountered this term before, but I had forgotten it. But you have described it perfectly, right? There's something great. It's a hat. It's a cool hat. But once you highlight and put something else on top of it, it becomes silly and difficult to ignore. It stops being sort of a part of the background, the costume, the general setting, and it becomes ridiculous. John Wick is the perfect example, and I had trouble putting my finger on what it was. I still like the subsequent John Wick movies, but there was something about the 2 and 3 and how many I'm going to see them all, and this is a mild complaint, but it definitely started to become kind of ridiculous, and this is a terrific way of describing it. They have put a hat on a hat, and they put a hat on that hat, and then they put a hat on the hat that's on the original hat, and it's really quite preposterous at this point.
Yeah, I think this translates pretty well to your own world building, except for the fact that, sometimes players, can do whatever they want, and they can investigate the hat and live in the hat if they want to. And, that's usually not a big problem for games where you say the premise is X and the world works with Y hat, and then you go from there. As long as everyone sticks with premise X, you don't have to do too much explaining or weird spooling out of your putting hats on your weird hat.
You're absolutely right. Be prepared in your RPG for your players to want to know more about the hat and require you to tell them about the hat. But a good example of this working well is some of our favorite elements of our favorite settings, things like the Morning from Eberron, or Where is Erodin from Golarion, right? These are hats, right? These are the hats that make the setting, and they are explicitly, you can't put a hat on the hat because there's nothing there. There's no answer. They're deliberately left vague. If you were to sort of like try to run a campaign where you intimately explore this kind of weird event, then it might become ridiculous, but as written, I think it works pretty well.
The best example for me is the great setting and game that we reviewed and interviewed with Olivia Hill, which is I Hunt, right? The premise?
Yes.
you're Uber for monster hunters. I mean, is the game about figuring out how the history of monsters in society or the gig economy works? No, not really. It's about surviving in that gig economy in the stories you tell with your like little found family of monster hunters.
That's a great example. You might dig into the past, but really the whole point of iHunt and the way that it's not about that, right? It's about surviving. It's about you open up your app and you hunt monsters. It's not about where did the app come from, why are there monsters, and that works well. I just thought of another good example. Blades in the Dark has lots of hats, right? But the core of the game, the core of the game is a heist, right? You're going to be interacting.
Wearing many hats, but none of those hats have other hats on them.
That's right. And you're not going to spend. I mean, there are lots of mysteries that you might unravel, but you're not going to be spending a lot of time investigating why there's no sun or where demons come from or what plasm is exactly, because you're too busy trying to survive in a grimdark Victorian nightmare world. But yeah, thank you so much, Devin. This is a really useful concept, and I think that's very helpful for thinking about both what works in storytelling and how to think about your own settings.
Thank you, Devin.
Here is another one. Hello, Rob and Matt. Your podcast remains one of my all-time favorites and a source of excellent advice, inspiration, and all-around quality for those of us interested in the TTRPG hobby. I know it's a much smaller world than it seems to be, so having such a high-quality podcast available on a semi-regular basis is a treat I try not to take lightly. I absolutely loved your deep dive into Starfinder recently, and I would love to request more Paizo coverage in general, as well as more non-Wizards of the Coast games / game companies. You do a great job of this already, but I wanted to encourage you to keep up the excellent work. The companies that do need press are the ones like Paizo that are committed to doing right by their employees. Go Union, Union strong. Mm-hmm. And the smaller press project / games like Blades of the Dark, iHunt, and the like. I don't know if I would ever have known about the latter two in particular if you hadn't featured them on your show. I absolutely love the lore deep dive episodes and would love to hear more about the properties you two nerd out so deeply on. Enthusiasm is fantastic and contagious. I never realized how nostalgic I was for Greyhawk until I came across the Greyhawk episode of the podcast. Neither did I. I've forgotten all the cool things about Greyhawk. It's the one that got me started on DM of None in the first place and remains one of my favorites. I know Greyhawk has its warts, but it's also what I cut my gaming teeth on, so I definitely have some attachment to it and enthusiastically file off the rougher edges in my home games. Just because it says so in the book doesn't mean I need to stick to it after all. Your fan and fellow lefty gamer, John.
Thanks, John. I think this next year, I know we have at least 2 in our list of to-do things. We are going to try and do a lot more games, not just like big ones like Starfinder and Pathfinder 2e, but a lot of smaller games that have really risen to the top in this perhaps golden age of non-corporate RPGs.
Yeah, we've been talking about doing Fate and Ryutama, and there's a whole bunch of others that we'd really like to do.
We got a Morkborg episode coming up, so
Morkborg. I would also, and this might be for a bonus episode, but I would love to do a deep dive into some of the Pathfinder adventures the way we do with all the Wizards of the Coast ones, because I like them and because it would be fun. I've had for a while now the Coyote and Crow core book that I've been meaning to do an episode on. I really like it. So thank you for the affirmation, John. I think we're going to do this anyway, but I'm glad to hear that at least somebody is getting something out of it. We are not going to stop doing 5th edition probably, but I would really like to do more non-5th edition. It has been a very heavy 5e year, and I feel like I have been reading an awful lot of 5e material, and I'm a little weary of it.
Yeah. I think adding the like 1 D&D playtest things to our regular lineup, it's just like maybe too much 5e. We got to spice it up and get back to some other games, which we will do. Thanks for the encouragement, John. Here's our next letter. Here we go. Hey, Matt. Hey, Rob. It's CJ, your favorite drawer. CJ did the wonderful art on the cover of our Warlord class.
Yeah, CJ, thanks so much. absolutely killer art. Thank you.
I've been going through your DM of None backlog, and episode 141, you ask listeners if they have a good explanation for underdark ecology. Namely, where's all the food coming from? How do dark elves and Snifflerbin and lithids eat if there's no energy from the sun growing their deep corn? I don't know how serious that question was, but I have an answer that has worked in my own game that I think is neat. Lots of sayings have ley lines, these big underground currents of magic that crisscross the world. In the same way that chlorophyll can turn energy from the sun and CO2 into sugars, manafills, trademark, can turn arcane emanations from ley lines into substance. At the bottom of the floor of the food drain, you have gross luminescent mushrooms that feed on magic and possess weird and wacky properties from their half-conjured bodies. In some games, where I want to introduce potions that restore spell slots, the material components come from these mushrooms. They also make for interesting environments. Subterranean fungal jungles. Underdark predators. They're a good navigation tool. Players can find ley lines.
Fungal jungles. That fungal jungle. Sorry, I'm sorry.
They can follow the ley lines to the highest density of cave mold and use those to find civilization. Anyway, long story short, my idea is brilliant and eminently gameable. Unfortunately for you, you are not allowed to steal this. Just try it. My dad works for Mojang, and he will have your account deleted / banned. Keep rolling them dice, CJ.
CJ, thank you. This is great. I love this thought. I don't remember what we said about the Underdark, but given everything else about the Underdark, I think it makes a lot of sense for magic and ley lines to be the core of the ecology. And in fact, this makes me think also that generally that might be more interesting when we are talking about ecology, to include in especially high magic games, include that when thinking about how monsters live and eat. You know, one setting that I think has done a interesting thing with this is Dragon Age, where the dwarves live underground, and they don't go too deep into detail, but they farm mushrooms, and then they also have these blind mole rat rabbit creatures called nugs, which are really funny. And they're both like herd animals.
Some good nugs.
Good nugs. They're herd animals, and they're also, I think they can be milked. Little weird and gross, but Dwarf Fortress has an entirely like mushroom based economy for your dwarves. So if you want to try to keep it vaguely realistic, I think you can argue that even a purely underground civilization like the Underdark could subsist on lichen and mold and mushrooms and cave-dwelling creatures. Gollum ate cave fish, So there's lots of things you can do with the Underdark, but I also think, after having read CJ's really excellent suggestion, that you might as well go big-time magic with it.
I like the big-time magic in that it just, as CJ said, allows you to do weird fights with weird ley lines and cool environmental effects and cool exploration encounters like what lives in a fungal jungle. All sorts of crazy magic creatures that are fun for the players to interact with and explore. It also helps you map the Underdark in a big scale, right?
Yeah.
Imagine you draw out the map of your world, and what defines your world map? Well, the lines of continents and mountains. What defines the Underdark map? You just draw a cool web.
Yeah.
And that web is the ley lines. And there's cool things at the nodes. And hey, when your players are exploring the Underdark, they go from node to node.
Yeah, I like that idea. You where the nodes cross, you have, I don't know, a big fungal jungle or a particularly rich field of some sort of magical mushroom or other sustenance, and that gives you a guideline, for how to map the ecology of your setting, if you're used to drawing or thinking about fields of wheat or something like that. Great suggestions, CJ. Thank you again for writing in. So much. Please do send us any additional ideas that you have. This was great. Okay, Here's another one from Andy. Andy writes, "Hey, I enjoy your show and insight on the game. I think you two have good ideas and perspective that I don't get on other D&D podcasts. I thought your 2 podcasts on Radiant Citadel were particularly good. I also liked the Starfinder episode, even though I never would have thought I would be into it. Well done." Andy has done something very good here. He has provided a sandwich where he gives us 2 compliments, and in the center is a criticism. So here comes the criticism. I do want to give you some constructive feedback as well. When you guys pull modern politics into the show, especially with anger and profanity, it really negatively affects the experience for those of us who do D&D as an escapist hobby. Profanity around J.K. Rowling, border officers in the state of Texas just pull me back into all the crap I listen to D&D podcasts to get away from. Anyway, this is just my 2 cents, and I only send it because I like your content so much. Keep doing a great job with the insight. You guys really think about the game in a smart and deep way. Andy. Andy, thank you for your constructive criticism. It is helpful to hear, and you are not the first person to voice these concerns about our podcast.
However, I appreciate the concern. We just might not follow it in this case. I mean, I appreciate your comments, but I live in Texas, and it's my right as a Texan to say, fuck this stupid
Let me say this,
fucking
Andy,
state.
you're not wrong to want to keep your games and politics separate. I do often think that is a foolish endeavor, but I don't want to criticize you for wanting to do that. But as we often say, everything is political, and I know that's a really annoying thing to hear, but it is true, including games. And more to the point, as much as I would like to make everybody happy and have constructed my entire life in the vain attempt to do so, I cannot make everybody happy, and I also do not think that I can control myself when it comes to this particular thing. I believe it or not, this represents a pretty tame version of both Rob and Rob's politics. So again, it may not seem so to a lot of people, but I am very measured on this podcast with how I talk about things and with how I approach these issues. And so I guess what I'm saying is it's not going to get better. So we've said this multiple times before. No. If you do not want to listen, no problem. I'm not upset. You do not have to listen if you don't like hearing about politics or about us bitching about J.K. Rowling or cops or Texas or conservatives, whatever. I think that we do a pretty good job of balancing. This is not a political podcast, but we're also never going to not talk about it. So anyway, that's a long way of me saying I respect your concerns. I hear and understand you, but I think that you may continue to be disappointed on this account because it is just not really something I can control. That's me personally. I think we both have this issue, but I specifically, I get amped, I get worked up, and I start running my mouth. And like I said, this represents a highly controlled version of that. So
yeah. Again, yes, thank you for your constructive feedback. Thank you for listening. I think probably nothing will change. Sorry.
We want to be honest about this. No, we want to be honest. We appreciate the criticism, and you're not the first person to write in with a valid criticism that we cannot address. That's kind of disappointing to hear, but we need to be honest about this kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah. As a let's see, a 7th generation Texan.
Me too. Texas, have we talked about this before?
I know. I think we talked about this, how we both have an ancestor.
Long timers, yeah.
Fucking here in the worst, most evil, even more evil days of Texas. And
yes, I will truly dark days, yeah.
You cannot take away my ability to get mad about the things I don't like about my home, because I want it to be a nice place, but sadly it's not always. Anyway, yes, we will continue to curse and go into fun political rants. And if you don't enjoy that, I'm sorry. Thanks for the criticism, though.
Yes, thank you, Andy, for writing in.
Speaking of politics, here's a question about silvered weapons. Hey, Matt and Rob, first time writing, long time listener, running Curse of Strahd as a new DM because I guess I like a challenge. I have a frustrated player. He decided to play a dwarf fighter with proficiency in hammers. He was frustrated that he can only deal resistant damage to most undead and no damage at all to were creatures. This came to a peak last night while in Vallaki, wolf hunters led the players out of the city to a werewolf den. They survived. Most players had a ton of fun, but this player just crossed his arms at the table. He did a great job as a meat shield, but he hated that he could not slice and dice. I really respect him as a player. I want to make this fun without breaking the game. I posted on other groups, and here are some possible solutions. I would love your take on this. 1, silver up his hammer. He would need to sacrifice like all of the loot he's gathered, and he wouldn't be able to afford it. 2, enchant the weapon. A sub option would also be to curse it, like every time he attacks an undead, he is reduced to half movement, which was frustrating, especially for a dwarf. 3, Strahd makes a deal with him in a dream, and now he owes him some sort of favor or consequence. I'm also open to other suggestions. Sarah. P.S. This player might be my husband. Hey, sometimes players are husbands. It happens.
Some husbands are players. Sarah, thank
but
you
not
for
all players are husbands.
Thank you for writing. This is actually a really great question. I'm really glad that you wrote in because this is something that, let me address the bigger issue here, and then I have a suggestion for you, which I think is pretty good. But I forget about this issue because I have been playing and running fighters for so long and martial characters, and so I hand wave a lot of this stuff. I tend to just let them do full damage most of the time. But if you play the game rules as written, it can be very frustrating to be a fighter or a rogue or a ranger, anybody without magical ability, and encounter, especially at early levels, a werewolf or any number of other creatures that are resistant. You overcome this pretty quickly with magical weapons. But again, if you're playing the game as written, you could spend 1 to 5 levels being useless in fights. And I really hate seeing my players struggle like this. And so I work really hard to adjust things ahead of time because I have been that fighter in multiple scenarios. So I appreciate you bringing this up, Sarah, because I don't know that we have addressed this before because, again, I think a lot of people homebrew it. It's one of those things when we talk about the martial caster disparity, this is a pretty specific example. Like when Counterspell became such a hot topic of conversation because it could shut down, caster characters, it's never a hot topic of conversation that, a bunch of things are immune to non-magical damage. Anyway, sorry, I ramble over. Yeah. The both of your options are good, and Matt has pointed out that adding silver to your dwarf fighter's hammer is probably affordable. It's only 100G. I'm aware that people are very poor in Curse of Strahd, but that is something that your players could probably scrounge together. I think that there's a better option though, and it relates to.
I would point out just on this point, just make sure that because this is in the player's handbook, silvered weapons. So I kind of assume that anything in the player's handbook is like common knowledge, right?
Oh yeah.
Just make sure that if he doesn't know, or if the party doesn't know, that like silvering weapons cost 100 gold. It's in the player's handbook along with the 10-foot pole and caltrops, and that there is probably someone in town who could do it for him. If not for 100 gold, then on like consignment, like, okay, go get my friend from the werewolf den or something like that, right?
Yeah.
It should be, and then he's back going to town on werewolves, and that's what we all want. Okay, back to the more interesting solution.
It's also something that even a crummy rudimentary blacksmith like all they have in Vallaki could still do. It's if you purchase the silver, find the silver, it can be done.
You could even say a dwarf just knows how to do this because he's a dwarf who is trained in hammers.
Yes. Your third option I think is the best one, but I have a suggestion. So Strahd might make a deal like this, but in Curse of Strahd, in the world of Ravenloft, in the broader dark domains, there are the dark powers. And the dark powers actually
Capital D, capital P.
capital D, capital P, are pretty significant later on in the Curse of Strahd campaign. They're a big part of the Amber Temple and some other key decisions that you have to make. And they intervene pretty frequently. And the way that they intervene is often by offering players a choice, exactly like you describe. I would make this even, honestly, I would pretty much give this to him for free. I would say the dark powers offer you, to enchant your weapon. Perhaps they comes to him in a dream. Perhaps he encounters an old statue or altar or something that allows him to enchant his hammer. And all that is required of him is that at a later date, they will ask a favor. And you as a DM, that's a chip you can play. I think that's a deal he would make. And that fits really well, in my opinion, having run this, with the overall thrust of Curse of Strahd, where the dark powers are involved and they have a goal, but it's pretty nebulous. But they do like to give the players some benefit. It even mentions, I think, in the 5th edition book that if they die, the dark powers might bring them back, because it is very common for players to die early on in Curse of Strahd. And since it's a low magic, low wealth campaign, there's not a lot of choices. So I think this fits really well with the campaign as is. And this is how I would approach it, to let your frustrated warrior have a little bit of a better time.
Yeah, this has the side benefit of not only solving this, damage reduction immunity problem, but also forefronting the dark powers a little earlier, but in a nebulous way, right? And the great thing is, if you give it to your player, as Rob suggested, with no strings attached other than nebulous favor, then it's absolutely something the dark powers would do, in that when the players get to the Amber Temple or some other place later on where they're important, they're like, oh yeah, the dark powers. We don't actually know they're called the dark powers. They're just strange things that give us free stuff. This is great.
Yeah. I think you've been given an opportunity here, actually, to do something cool, to, like Matt said, foreshadow the dark powers, which Curse of Strahd doesn't do a very good job of, given how important they are later in the campaign. So it's a bummer that your husband, or the player who might be your husband, had a bad time, but I think you can resolve this pretty handily, and without having to do a whole lot of modification to the campaign. I think there's actually a setting as written option that is pretty good. So I hope that's helpful, Sarah. Let us know if that works, or if you've resolved this some other way. Great question, though. I'm glad you brought it up.
Great question, and great job on your Dungeon Master passive perception skills, noticing the state of a husband, arms crossed. Never good body language. Thanks, Sarah.
Thanks, Sarah. All right, here's another one. This one's from Zane. Zane writes, I'm a relatively new listener, and I am greatly enjoying working through your previous episodes. I am also a big fan of both Shadowrun and Lord of the Rings, and I'm glad to see you both are, too. Yes, we are. Having recently reread The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings, I'm interested in running a Shadowrun campaign based on the plot of Lord of the Rings, and was wondering if this was something you wouldn't mind please brainstorming. I noticed you haven't done many Shadowrun episodes, and I'm sure it's nowhere near as popular as your D&D material, but perhaps this could be briefly in a letters episode? Well, yes, it can. Though I do want to say I love Shadowrun, and I wish we could do more of it.
Yes.
I'm mostly just sad because the current state of Shadowrun is so miserable, but I would always be happy to do more Shadowrun, so thank you for the question.
Yeah, maybe we should do a classic Shadowrun adventure for one of our adventure episodes soon.
That might be fun. In particular, Zane writes, I'd love to know what story beats you'd include from Lord of the Rings and how you'd remix them into the Shadowrun world. Hope you're both keeping well. Keep rolling them dice. Kind regards, Zane.
I would say this is a fun kind of wacky idea that I think can help you build out a Shadowrun campaign. Before we get into this, I'd say the one thing you would want to avoid with an idea like this is in any way trying to do a plot by plot, beat by story beat, reimagining of Lord of the Rings or The Hobbit, right? Role-playing games don't work like novels. You can't You can't do that. There was a great web comic once called Board of the Rings or something. No, not Board of the Rings. Dungeon Master of the Rings or something like that.
Something like
it was
that.
Just
yeah.
just making fun of
screenshots of Lord of the Rings. It was really funny. They had one for Star Wars too. It was very funny.
Right. Imagining a dungeon master trying to take players through the Lord of the Rings plot, and it, of course, just doesn't work. However, the idea of the One Ring as a Shadowrun MacGuffin or an evil dragon like Smaug that needs to be taken out, I think is a good one. As long as you don't, and I think the coolest way to do this is to do it without telling your players. And just being like, I'm drawing a bunch of stuff from Lord of the Rings. And then, at the end of the campaign, you can be like, well, maybe there'll be a big reveal later on that, the evil AI is actually, it's called itself the Ring.
Zane, this is very interesting. I would not have thought of this. And quite frankly, I don't think that this is a natural pairing. That being said, I love a challenge and I think it's interesting. And so even though I never would have thought of this, and I have some questions about how it worked together, I think there's something here, and it's interesting. The initial thing that sort of comes to mind as a roadblock is that Shadowrun is a very episodic heist-based game, and it works, or a jobs-based game, right? And it works best that way. And so initially I was like, well, I don't think this is going to work at all. But when you think about it, Lord of the Rings is just a reverse heist. It's just, instead of taking something from a, guarded and secret place, it's putting it back. So yeah. I think that Matt's suggestion of just making this a very broadly, they have you can use Johnny Mnemonic as a model here too. Like there's a thing, maybe it's a data disk or a packet of information or a chit or an AI program or something, and your players have to get it back to either destroy it or get rid of it or contain it into some well-guarded corporate headquarters or something deep inside one of the no-go zones or abandoned arcology or something like that. I think that if you very, very broadly sketch the strokes of the Hobbit, Lord of the Rings, that would be awesome. But the closer that you try to adhere to the specific structure or story beats, the more your players are almost certainly going to foil your plan.
Two broad strokes I think that could be fun Shadowrun adventures is one is like maybe your session one or your first Shadowrun session after a couple of milk runs, is that a dwarven Mr. Johnson comes to the players and says, we had a small dwarven colony in the old Cheyenne Mountain NORAD complex, and it's been taken over by a, intermediate or lesser Draco form dragon who has taken over our AA corporation that we ran out of there, and we want it back. We're hiring a team of dragon slayers, right? And then the first job is just go kill this dragon, right? Or, find a couple, disable some defenses as one or two sessions. Then third, head into the mountain and kill the dragon, right? It's an assassination mission. During that mission, the players all become infested with a rogue Magitech AI, hand waves some stuff here, right? It's the most powerful AI of all time. It could control the Matrix if it could. It can't be stopped, but the players have like a bit of its, soul because it's partially magic or something like that. And then, then Rob said the next mission could be go to a no-go zone. And the only way to kill this AI is to put it in its own matrix where it thinks it rules the world, but it's in fact contained within something that was built for it, or something like that. I don't know what you could do for the Ring. My initial thought is the Ring used to be a small doorbell program that existed before the Cataclysm and the Sixth World. Get it? Ring.com.
Yep. I like it.
That's all I got. Yeah.
No, I think that's great. I like the Ring as a program of some sort. So I think it's a good idea. I think there's definitely something there. I think it would be an interesting challenge, but I definitely think it could be fun in Shadowrun. So let us know if you go with that, and good luck. I love Shadowrun, faults and all. So this is a really interesting take on it. So I'm curious to see if it works.
And then just, follow your players with fun Shadowrun stuff. If you do the kill not smog in a dwarven mountain, and they're then interested in something else, just let them do the other thing too. Don't try and force a Lord of the Rings plot. It's not going to work. But fun thing to take inspiration from. Thanks for that fun letter, Zane. Okay, Rob, so we got a lot of letters about our 3-part series reaction that was a little more scripted, trying something else. I think I have an idea for another one of these once we get up the time and energy in the future, but lots of people liked it. Lots of people had some criticisms. Thanks, everyone, for writing in.
I'm glad that so many of you liked this, because this is, this is one of my crosses to bear, I suppose. I am just... obsessed. I find right-wing ideology, if I say fascinating, I don't want that to sound like it means I approve. It's just it's like a puzzle box, right? I feel compelled to try to figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
So it was really enjoyable for me. I want to be clear, Matt did all of the work on this episode, but I really enjoyed talking about it and doing the reading. So here's some of your response, or some of what you wrote. Matt writes. Matt from Thunder Bay, Ontario, Canada, writes, just listen to your reaction, 3-part deep dive, and I wanted to tell you that it totally rules. Thanks for putting that together and putting it out in the world. Great stuff. Thank you, Matt. Thunder Bay sounds like a really cool place. Is it cool? I don't know. I'm going to assume that it is.
It sounds like a place on your generic fantasy map. Can't believe it's in Canada. Here's another one. Hey guys, I recently started listening to your podcast and really like it so far. After the last 3 episodes about reactionaries, I've been a little torn. I absolutely agree that the concept of, quote, evil races is bad, but there is something I find really evocative about the trope of evil race / group / empire / etc. Do you have any ideas on how to create such a group? I feel like that's a question that answers itself because a monolithic evil group is bad, but I'd like to hear your thoughts. Thanks a lot, Alexander.
This is a really good question, and I'm going to try to not spend too much time on it because I think we've answered it in part before, but it's something that I grapple with. So I have 2 answers. I think that it is genuinely a lot of fun to play an RPG where you kick down the door and you kill a bunch of bad guys and you don't feel bad about it. Now, that is a problem if those are living, breathing, thinking, sentient creatures. I think that it is safe, in my opinion, to kill infinite amounts of mindless undead. Those are always a safe enemy. Zombies, even maybe something like a vampire, I think they don't even have to be mindless. I also think that constructs, automata, robots are usually pretty safe. You can argue with me if you like that robots have sentient, but if they're actual AIs, they're robots, they're constructs, then they're just magically animated suits of armor or whatever. So if you want to avoid having to grapple with this, I think that undead constructs, certain, non-intelligent creatures are totally fine as an evil group or a antagonist to deal with. In terms of like an empire or something like that, I think that it's also just fine to be like, this is an evil empire. They're fascists. They're Romans. They're trying to take over the world. They're trying to conquer everything. Now, your players should probably not take too much delight in like murdering wantonly everybody or torturing agents of this empire. But I think that in, the broad sense of defending yourself, defending the world from a conquering empire, I think that's relatively unproblematic for a role-playing game.
Here's the only answer I'll give. I want you to think about like the concept of goblins as an evil race as they're presented in 5th edition, which are, they're basically a fully sentient society, but they almost all happen to be evil. And the way goblins are presented in the game Morkborg. I'm just going to read right now from page 58 of the Morkborg rulebook and their description of goblins. All goblins carry a curse. Once like you, they are now trapped in the prison of their own crazed goblin flesh. Only their eyes reveal the truth, a ruined mind watching its body prison perform terrible deeds. Even being attacked by goblins sins the curse, carried on the winds of their hate. Hit or miss, it doesn't matter. In the dark of Sarkesh, they shoot at passers-by with twanging bows. You must find and kill the goblin before your mind is paralyzed. If the curse-carrying creature still lives, D6 days after the attack, you will irrevocably warp into one yourself. Then only the dark of Sarkesh will hide you. Which is more interesting? You know? There's just the gods made this race evil. They're all evil. Or like a magically evil set of beings. Could be like skeletons or mindless automata, or something like the goblins that we just read. They're cursed creatures, and they want to attack other creatures because it will pass their curse along.
And you are freeing them from their horrible flesh prison and protecting yourself. I mean, it's always going to be, I don't know. There's always something about just this sort of fantasy violence that if you think too hard about it can become unpleasant, but it's also okay to just, I mean, again, you are inhabiting a fantasy. We are role playing here. So yeah, I like the way that Morkborg approaches this, and we'll talk more about that. But yeah, just think about that. Great advice from Matt. Okay, here's another one. This one is from Josh. Josh writes, first off, I'd like to say that I'm a big fan of the podcast. I've been listening for a few years, and you guys have really helped me develop as a game master after assuming the role in the absence of someone else more qualified. I like to think I'm in that scene from Starship Troopers when Johnny Rico is told he's got the job until he dies or they find someone better.
Come on, apes, you want to live forever?
That's right. Feels like an appropriate analogy to the stress of DMing. Listen, that's how most of us got into this job, so good for you. First and foremost, thanks for what you guys do. We listeners cannot possibly appreciate how long it takes to research, edit, and polish each episode, and yet you consistently and regularly put out high-quality material, all while holding down day jobs like the rest of us. In naval parlance, bravo Zulu. Good job to you guys. I'm glad that it seems that way. Thank you. I wanted to commend you for your recent series about reactionaries and the alt-right neoconservative backlash born of the attempts to make the hobby and our general social interactions more inclusive. I plugged it in during an evening workout and then ended up binging all 3 episodes because it was so compelling. It reminded me of some of the material we cover with our students at the U.S. Marine Corps Expeditionary Warfare School, EWS, at which I am an instructor. Semper Fi, Marine. At EWS, the aforementioned course is an elective called The Other Side of the Coin, which is a small seminar focused on the nature of how social movements become insurgencies and how governments choose to interact with them. One of the modules we present to the students covers the rise of radicalized neoconservatism and white supremacy in the U.S., particularly over the last 30 years. I've included some of the reading material we gave to the students that reinforces much of what you put into your 3 episodes on alt-right reactionaries. Something I found interesting that motivated me to write was something you mentioned in episode 244. The disdain gamers garnered in the 70s and 80s now fuels the vitriol they return on the others of their choosing. This is a social phenomenon that radical neoconservatives and the alt-right are deliberately weaponizing, exploiting the shame and bitterness that comes from the intersection of rejection and formative childhood memories. It's the age-old, it sucked for me, so it's going to suck for you, or more specifically, we were plank holders who weathered the storm. So any changes we have not sanctioned are perversions of what we know to be pure. This is a really great way of putting it.
Yeah.
This fixation on the purity of the good old days is born of the deliberate effort to connect the perception that these folks will never fit into the crowds that threaten an alt-right white supremacist worldview. According to these neoconservative messages, you're not a creep for expecting that your affectations of chivalry and nice guy behavior be rewarded with sex companionship and work opportunities. It's the liberal media and non-gender conforming feminists that are trying to redefine masculinity and cut you out of your God-given rights. For a community that developed an identity grounded in being rejected by mainstream cultural norms, this message resonates intensely. It is a safety valve, a cop-out, and the relative anonymity of the internet and meme culture's tendency to paint critics as lacking a sense of proportionality, i.e., it's only a problem because you said it's a problem, can't take a joke, are fuel on the fire. So with all that, and apologies it was so lengthy, thanks for strapping on the greaves and wading into the gore. I hope you haven't caught a bunch of shit for it, but even typing that I know, anyone dumb enough to reply to a podcast episode about reactionary bullshit with their own reactionary bullshit is deserving of your next barrage of mocking and ridicule. Keep doing good work. You are examples for us all to emulate. Best, Josh. Josh, thank you. Also, there were many wonderful turns of phrase in that letter. Thank you for writing. That was a fine thing to read and well written. So thank you so much for writing in, Josh.
I have only to say that was an ugly email, a bug email.
A bug email. Listen.
Thank you so much, Josh.
Listen, I'm from the TTRPG space, and I say kill them all.
Oh my god. Yeah. Well, okay. Enough Starship Trooper talk, but thank you for getting us started on it, Josh. And thank you for all those really cool points and sort of chilling deeper knowledge about reactionary movements in the United States. Here's our next letter. Hi, I'm a longtime listener of Dungeon Master of None. I love your show, and not only for its excellent mechanical DM advice, but also because of the social advice you put forward, particularly on the front of, quote, woke, unquote, D&D. I did not go to college, so I used you two as sort of a litmus test for challenging my own bullshit. I'm a white super nerd. My regular group of 4 years is extremely diverse on all fronts. I have 6 players and only one of them is a white male. Your advice has helped me navigate some serious bumps in my road, particularly the part of my world that is, quote, not Egypt/Arabia, and some bad accents I've done in the past. And my players are actually really receptive to me adjusting my sensitivity levels.
I'm sure I've said this before. I just want to jump in here. I never wanted him to feel criticized by our podcasts, but I also want to be clear that in the year before we started this podcast, I almost certainly had a not Asia setting and did a pretty bad, like African or Indian accent. So I don't want it to sound like, this is something that is, not a mistake that I have ever made or that, is unforgivable. So, we're all on our own journey.
Right. These are all basically whenever we're talking about mistakes about these things, it's because we've already done them. So
yes.
Regarding the drow, neither I or my 2 black players ever saw them as an allegory for people of color, and we're all huge fans of drow-centric works such as Queen of the Demon Web Pits, our favorite book ever written under WotC, or under TSR, I think, right?
Queen of the Demon Web Pits. I don't remember. Sorry.
It doesn't matter. I never thought that either were inherently evil. Thrall from World of Warcraft was always the good guy in my eyes because he was the spiritualist who wanted to protect nature, and Drizzt is one of the most iconic D&D characters of all time. So the alignment stuff isn't what I'm bent out of shape about. What I worry about is that we might not see the drow in future editions, and orcs will just be green-tusked humans. This feels like a loss to me. I want to know if there is a way, like with my other correction thing, to preserve the sort of flavor around the species like orc, drow, goblins, dwarves, etc., without dipping my toe into the icy waters of alt-right insuldom. Love the show. Thanks for reading this if you did. That 3-part episode on reactionaries is an important thing to have put into the space. Bram.
Bram, thank you for writing. And I think, honestly, I think you've hit on it. You've already kind of answered it. If I also feel similarly about orcs and the drow. I have tried to rescue orcs in multiple settings and multiple games that I have played because I think they're neat. And I never played them as inherently evil, and I gave them backstories, and that's something you can just do. I also liked how orcs were portrayed in Warcraft 3 and afterward, though I want to point out that if you go back and play Warcraft or even Warcraft 2, they are pretty unambiguously evil, demon worshipping, just bad guys to fight. And Blizzard realized,
then when they got more complicated, they became a lot more interesting.
Exactly. Blizzard realized that this was a problem, especially if they're going to be running a massively multiplayer online game where you could play an orc potentially forever. And they made them more interesting. So I think that's an answer right there. There's Drow in Eberron, and they're antagonists often, but they're not inherently evil. So I think that you've already sort of answered the question. You've already figured out your approach. I also sort of worry what, if anything, Wizards is going to do with orcs and drow and goblins in the future. But that's also not something that you have to worry about. They're going to continue to do a bad job because they've always done a bad job, even if they are acknowledging sort of the way that they have been portrayed is problematic. But if you like them, and I think so do I, then you have all the opportunity in the world to portray them in a way that fits for you and your players.
Yeah, I don't think drow are ever going to go away, but could they be reimagined just like orcs were in the World of Warcraft universe? I think they absolutely could. Hopefully it will be a good reimagining or retweaking or retconning or just something. But yeah, I love drow too. I think I don't think Drizzt is ever going away.
No, he's not going anywhere. Yeah. So, great question, Bram, but I think that, and I'm really glad that your group approached these issues the way they did, and you didn't find a problem with it, and you've found your own approach, and I honestly want to encourage you to just continue with that, because I think you've done it right.
Yeah. I feel like, at the end of the day, a lot of our critiques and talking about this is just asking everyone at their table to think a little more interesting, in a more interesting way, or a little more deeply about some of the baggage we bring into things. And as long as you've done that, you're usually pretty good. And it sounds like, you've done it.
And this is the thing, and this actually relates back to the reaction episode, but like, if somebody is playing a D&D game and they have orcs or goblins that are all evil and their players run around killing orcs and goblins, no one's going to come into their house and slap the board out of their hands and, shake a finger at them. I don't know. We would just like you to, we just think it's more interesting and more thoughtful and more inclusive to do it differently. So yeah, anyway, thank you again, Bram. All right, our next one. Here's a letter that starts with, "Hey, Rob and Matt, this is my first time writing in. Really enjoying your series on reactionary resentment in the TTRPG scene. In one of the episodes, one of the right-wing gamer YouTubers you quote uses the term baizuo, and I wanted to shed some light on this term. Baizuo is a slang term on Chinese social media networks like Weibo, WeChat, etc. that literally translates to white left. It's recently been taken up as an epithet by right-wingers in the West. I missed this, so really keen listening here."
Yeah, the word was said and you're like, what does that mean? I'm like, I don't know. And then we moved on.
Yeah.
In our deeply researched 3-part episode.
I now I remember this and I'm like, I didn't realize what he was saying. So thank you for this letter. In the minds of Western white right-wingers, baizuo refers to Western white liberal leftists who are perceived by Chinese observers as being effete or weak, by being overly concerned with political correctness and weakening the American body politic's ability to resist the rise of a strong China. It's a modern twist on older right-wing conspiracies about left-wingers weakening the West from within in the service of foreign powers. Ironically, though, while there are Chinese commentators who use the term in this way now, its origin actually comes from the left-wing Chinese blogosphere and expresses a frustration with the Western left for not being radical enough. The white in white left also has little to do with race in the original formulation, and instead refers to the white monarchist side of the Russian Civil War, wherein some left-wing factions initially supportive of the Bolsheviks, the Reds, sided with the whites. Thought as fellow leftists you would find this little tidbit interesting. All the best, Abram. Abram, I did find that interesting. I found it fascinating. Thank you so much for writing in.
We love a right-wing streamer accidentally calling someone part of Admiral Kolchak's army by accident.
It is zero surprise to me that this is something that has appeared in the other thing about reactionaries, about right-wingers, is that their language is so deeply insular and inaccessible to anybody who doesn't, seep their mind in this garbage. And I am familiar with most of it, but baizuo is definitely one that I did not realize the origins of. So thanks for catching that and responding, Abram. That is so interesting.
Very cool. Hello there. I just
there.
wanted to say that I'm a relatively new listener, but I love your podcast. The most recent series about the right-wing reaction has been fantastic as well. I've been spamming these episodes to everyone. One thing that's interesting to me is how far right ideology inserts itself into cultures and then spreads from there. If you've ever been in Facebook shitpost groups and subreddits, you'll see an innocent Star Wars group turn really questionable because some folks have free reign to make certain kinds of jokes. The podcast Worst Year Ever has an early episode on this kind of phenomenon in the furry community and what they do to push back against reactionary infiltration. I wonder how much of this is also rooted in the original cultural expectation that nerdy stuff is for, quote, others, as depicted on it in every TV show from the 80s to 2009. I wonder if nerds' perceived alienation from, quote, jocks and preps helps feed into trying to gatekeep and make their hobbies exclusionary. I just wanted to make sure you received some praise for it, since I can only imagine you're getting a bit of criticism on these episodes. Bear.
Thank you, Bear. That's a great point, and I don't know how obvious this is, but this is a genuine challenge and a strength of a genuine challenge with opposing it, but a strength of right-wing ideology, which is that if all you care about is gaining and preserving power, then you don't have to worry about being accurate, about being correct, about people liking you. You're again, there's something very like simple and clarifying, and truly dedicated right-wingers understand that it's really it is about the acquisition and control of power, whereas us moronic leftists actually believe and care about things, which puts us at a disadvantage with these sorts of people. And it makes it very easy, if you're not on guard, for them to infiltrate communities by pretending to share their values or be interested in the same things, and then subtly slip in right-wing ideological memes and whatnot.
Yeah, and thanks for the recommendation for a listen, and glad the furry community has figured out a way to push back on this. As a longtime Pittsburgh resident, it was always fun when the city hosted AnthroCon, and Pittsburgh, I think, was a pretty welcoming host to the furry community. I'm glad they've straightened their Nazis out. Here's some quick responses to our reaction episode.
Hey all, thanks for the great 3-part episode. Thanks for caring enough to talk about this, from Caleb. Thank you, Caleb.
Reaction part 1 was outstanding. Conversation and education is the only way to move forward, and you both accomplished this with this episode. It was your Dungeon Master advice that got me listening. It was content like this that made me a patron. Thanks for all you do, Mickey.
Here's another one. Our listener writes, after listening to the episodes, I reflected that there feels like a spectrum of reactionary behavior. On one end is those people who claim that SJWs are ruining our game, in quotes, and on another more benign side is a player who may just not be empathetically engaged with the game. To my question, how can a Dungeon Master shed light on the world so that players can choose to not be passive or reactionary, not empathetically engage with the story? Would this also expose players who are reactionary or conservative, and how would you deal with a player like that at your table? Keep rolling them dice, Mitch. Quickly, Mitch.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead, Matt.
Oh, I was just going to say, most of the players who play my games are either students or friends, and so I don't really have to deal with this problem as much, but I don't know, keep an open and inclusive rule at your table, and I don't know, make them feel included,
I will tell you how I approach this. I also mostly play with friends, so I don't have to deal with it. But in the past, I always try to give people the benefit of the doubt. And what you hear on this podcast is how I approach it in real life. Actually, maybe a little gentler in real life. And I try to give people the benefit of the doubt. They don't get infinite chances if they continue to be jerks. If I find that somebody is reactionary, then they are not allowed to continue to play with me or my group. But that is how I approach it. Now, I want to say that I am a white cis male, and so that's not super challenging for me. Nobody is required to do this. You do not have to tolerate or put up with anybody who is making you or anyone else feel uncomfortable. and not engaging with the game in the way that you would like. That is just how I approach it. So if you are concerned about how to bring people in or how to make people feel included, and I agree that there are a lot of people, we read one of their letters at the beginning of this episode, who are not engaged, not political, but may be susceptible to this type of thing, who you don't necessarily want to scare off. All of that being said, it's a game. You're not required to do anything about that. That's just how I approach it.
Right. Yeah. Dungeons and Dragons and role-playing games are not designed to, I don't think you're really saying this, but I have seen this idea crop up in a couple places. You're not going to convert someone politically through playing a game. So, you definitely don't want to hope for that. But if I think Rob's advice of if you actually have a true reactionary at your table, it's probably best to cut them out. You don't owe anyone your games.
And I agree with that. I just want to say that, you may influence somebody by talking openly about what you believe and being inclusive and being understanding. But that is not your job. That is not the purpose of role-playing games. So don't stress over much about it. And if somebody's giving you too much shit, you do not have to put up with them.
Agreed. Last letter on the reaction episodes, and maybe a good last word. Hello, I really loved your recent series on reactionaries at gaming, but there's one slight correction I want to make. In the third episode, you frequently referred to discussion of transgender people within right-wing forums as political discussion. I think this is an inaccurate statement, although I do understand what your intentions were. The existence of transgender people is not a political issue. What they're engaging in is not a political discussion, but hate speech of one variety or another. Again, I understand what your intentions were. I know they are both allies of the trans community. I do, however, think it's important to highlight that being transgender is not a political statement, nor is it an ideology. Transgender people exist across a wide spectrum of politics, even if it doesn't always seem like it. Just look at Jessica Watkins, for example, or Caitlyn Jenner. I am concerned that my woke card will be revoked if I wish you a happy Christmas, so I will just wish you a happy Sunday, Megan J.
Megan, thank you for this correction, and I really appreciate you writing in. This, I don't remember exactly what we said, but that does sound like something that I might have. And this was an error, and I apologize for it. This is a good example of how good the right is at framing and forcing the discussion. But Megan is absolutely correct that the existence of transgender people is not political. It just is. And what they are doing is engaging in hate speech. They are not talking about politics. They are attacking a group of people based on their identity. So that is absolutely something that we did wrong. So I apologize for that. That was a slip of the tongue, a real unforced error when it comes to
a real boner, a whoopsie daisy. No, yeah, we got that one wrong, and thanks for the correction, Megan. And this is, of course, Megan, our special Dragonlance and Kryn correspondents. Please check out the Dragonlance Nexus if you haven't already.
Important correction, and when talking about transgender people and how the right refers to them, I think this is a really important thing to bear in mind. It is something that I absolutely know, and I'm so mad at myself for letting myself get dragged into the rights argument. That's, again, this is such a good example of how sinister and corrupting it is to engage with this if you're not careful. So I really appreciate your feedback here, Megan.
Yeah, thank you. Great criticism and correction. We appreciate it. All right, Rob. Well, I think have gotten through most of our non-insane feedback on the sorry, and by insane, we've gone through most of our non-reactionary feedback on the reaction episodes. It was a lot of fun to put those together, and now we can get back to reviewing some games and some Dungeon Master advice. Though, Rob, I do have an idea for another one of these series. It will take us many, many months to put it together.
I'm glad that so many people enjoyed this because it was fun to do, and we'll probably do something like this again. It does take a long time to prepare, so we'll be doing some simpler things in coming months. So As always, everybody, thank you so much for your letters. Thanks for writing in. I hope you all survived 2022 mostly in form. And even though it feels foolish to hope, here's hoping that 2023 is a little better.
A little bit better.
A little bit better. All right, everybody, stay healthy, stay safe, and keep rolling them dice.
If it kills me,